Okay, little one on decadence and addiction. So, my name's Mark, and I am an alcoholic. That's true. So, I have been addicted to many things in my life, but the worst one by far for me was alcohol. I've had other sort of drug-related addictions, behavioural addictions at times as well. I tend to be one of those people whose addictions tend to sort of pop up in different places, and sometimes it's something relatively benign like social media or I don't know, sugars comes and goes for me as one. Other times it's things that are less benign, like just shitty behaviours or whatever, and think other times things that are really catastrophic and could really have killed me, like the alcoholism. I was 10 years drunk every day, so not like a morning drinker, but I was utterly dependent on alcohol, and pretty much every night I couldn't sleep without it, I couldn't function without it, and what's an addiction? Well, something you do that you say you're not going to do. I'd say, I'm not going to drink today. And I'd walk past your off license. Before I knew it, I was in there buying beers. What the fuck? So something where you're not free. Yeah, it's something where you say you're going to not do it and you do it. So there's a lack of freedom. There's a lack of choice. So it's a saying that a junkie will steal your wallet and help you look for it, in the, they have a choice about their drugs, right? It's weird because you can't let people off the hook, but equally that is the central feature. Central feature. Actually, if you talk to an addict, it's always everybody else's fault. It's never their fault. So part of recovery is always saying, hey, I've got, this is just me. I am responsible for my behaviour, taking that adult position. So one part of the definition, though, is that you do it when you say you're not going to do it. Compulsive quality. The other one to me is it has to damage some part of your life. So someone to me the other day said, I think I smoke too much weed. I was like, okay, well, let's look at that. Do you do it when you say you're not going to do it? Yeah, I'm like, oh yeah. And does it damage other parts of your life? Okay. Another part of the compulsive one actually is that you can't stop when you start. Like, most people can have a drink and leave it. I have a drink, have another drink, have another drink. The man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, the drink takes the man, is the saying. You explain that to a 10-year-old, it's not that complicated. Some people can have a drink and stop. Some people have one drink and then keep having more. Yeah. And it's damaging some part of your life. So it's not like, you smoke a spliff on a Friday night to relax after work, and that's your Friday night. You watch Netflix, eat some fucking munchies, go to bed, get up the next day, you're fine. That's not addiction. For me, it's like, well, there's got to be some damaging quality to it. So I'm a chocolate addict, and I'm like, does it make you obese and give you a heart attack? Is it really damaging you? If not, maybe fucking chill out and enjoy your chocolate, whatever your thing is. Let's not be too fucking puritanical. So what's this? What about addiction in the context of decadence? Well, studies show that even on rats, it's not really just about the substance. The substance is a way they're self-medicating. It's the way they're dealing with their life. Yeah, like you give rats in a cage cocaine, they'll just keep taking it till they die. But if you give them like rat paradise, where they're set up with female rats and other rats, and they've got fucking toys and shit, rat shit to do, they don't take it all the time. Yeah. So if your life is meaningless, empty, painful, addictions become far more likely. You're far more likely to get addicted to anything. Yeah. So the context is really important, and particularly around pleasure and around meaning. So what happens in a decadent culture? Well, there's a couple of things. One, that meaning just isn't there. The meaning which helps us cope with the suffering of life is just not there in a decadent culture. The meaning is lost. So it means that addictions are far more likely. Secondly, usually in a decadent culture, the community aspect is lost. Well, we co-regulate in a community, and the communities help keep us accountable. There's certain communities that have almost no addiction. It's very difficult to be an addict in a lot of communities because just everyone would see, just very practically. But on top of that, there's ritual and, again, the meaning, but there's the community support. People they'd love you too much. They'd stop it happening. Practically, but also, just in terms of how the sort of moral and spiritual and emotional uplift of being in a community means it's much harder to be addicted. It's not normalized, right? In decadent cultures, addiction starts to just be normal. You see people like vaping outside their office, whatever, lining up for their coffee they have to have. Even these things are just normalized. It's totally normalized, Yeah. Yeah. You see that like in any of the big cities, people just drinking like ridiculous amounts. It's normalized. So it's the community aspect, the meaning aspect, also like in a way, not not giving into an addiction requires, we could say, discipline, right? Well, what does that mean? It's not just willpower, it's a skill of dealing with renunciation. So if the culture is about hedonism, the skill of renouncing something, of not doing something, it's just not built in people as a skill, right? It's not built in people. Also, we see lack of eco-regulation as well, the disconnection from the land. So, my experience is whenever I'm in nature, my addictions are a whole lot less bugging me, as it were. There's a sort of narcissism to decadent cultures as well, where you put yourself central, center of the world, right? You're not in service to anything. There's no God. There's no country. There's no higher power. So in 12-step, so that's recovery groups like AA, these are, they have their ups and downs. You find a lot of people hating on them on the internet, but they help a lot of people for almost no money. And, there's millions of members around the world, millions of members. So people have really got a lot of benefit from these groups, including myself. And I think it's so wonderful. They're anarchistically run, accessible, even if you've got no money. 12-step groups say you have to have a higher power. Originally it was going to be inner power, but they decided on higher power in the end. And why? Because if you put yourself at the centre of the universe, it don't go well. And in AA, it's wonderful, actually. They say you can have any higher power. It can be, my friend's higher power is music, or it can be the universe, or love, something abstract, or, I've got a Muslim friend, his is just Allah, it's just aligned with his religion. So it can be all these different things. As a sponsor once said to me, your higher power can be anything as long as it's not fucking you. As long as it's not you. Because that self-centeredness, that putting yourself right in the middle of things, just doesn't end well. It leads to addiction. Equally, 12-step groups have learned about service. They literally call it service, and you might make the tea or put the chairs out. I've done treasury for groups before. And that, again, not putting yourself in the middle, the service elements are really, really important. Yeah, really, really important. I think another aspect is just physicality really helps with addiction. I remember when I was early days of being in recovery, I'd walk around between all the meetings, I'd stomp everywhere at 1,000 miles an hour. And then I realized the gym was really good for me and exercise was really good for me. And it's something about burning off that charge. There's what they call restless, irritable, and discontent. It's just in your system. Well, if it's in your system and in the culture, you're doubly screwed. And the culture's not very physical. We've moved away from the land and physicality, and it becomes much more cerebral. Again, decadent cultures tend to be more sort of refined in that sense. They lose their robust kind of physicality. You're not burning that charge off. Yeah, there's some of the things that occur to me. It's interesting because it's the sort of moral relativism. To me, that also intertwines, which we'll see in a decadent culture, intertwines with addiction. Something to cope with the fact that you don't really have a moral code. You're not really living up to any kind of set of ethics. Deep down, you do know some things are right or wrong. There's a shallowness to life in a decadent culture that I think in some ways people who are inclined towards alcoholism, drug addiction, they're sort of mystics in a way. They're inclined towards the magical, the mystical, the deep, and they can't access that in a shallow decadent world. So they try and access it chemically. Decadent culture is also materialistic, so one tries to access things materially, yeah? Literally with an addiction, you're just trying to get God through a drink, that's what they call it, spirits, So lots of crossover in the language is interesting. Yeah. So if you have got an addiction, there are things you can do. 12-step groups are out there. I say much maligned. If you went to one and didn't like it, go to fuck another one. Try a slightly different fellowship, they call it, or a different group. Different meeting, you might have just met some dickheads at one. The eco stuff's really important. Meditations help me a lot. Exercises help me a lot. Some people are definitely more inclined to it than others. You seem to be born with the genes. It runs in my family. My dad was alcoholic too. It runs in families. But as I said, in decadent culture, I feel like it's just becoming more and more common. I feel like my sort of ADHD kind of addicted mentality is just becoming the norm in culture. But Russell Brand's book on addiction is good. It just talks about sort of generalized sense of addiction. Alan Carr, the guy that wrote about giving up smoking, wrote a good little book on addiction. There's lots of different approaches now, different things out there that work for different people. So if one thing doesn't work for you, give it something else a try. But I think you'll see some of those principles about anti-decadence really, like, you know, stuff like the service, the counter, the narcissism, the physicality. It really aligns, doesn't it? Stuff around addiction. It's something I know a little bit about. If you've got questions, comments, happily do my best to help if I can. As I said, how old am I? How sober am I now? I've actually lost track. I think it's 17 years. It's a long time. It's a long time. You're supposed to know your sober birthday and all that. I fucking lost track, which is, to me, that's a good sign. You know, it's like I'm not counting the days anymore. It's been a long time since I had a drink. So, yeah, a few thoughts for today.